Nhexus, level 24 upgrade. So for this upgrade, I'm going to be replacing the old stock steering Bellcranks with a high-performing steering Bellcranks found on the Slash and Stampede 4x4. Now these do work on the two-wheel drive Slash, Rustler, and Bandit. There is a couple of things I am going to have to modify first. Now, I am going to have to cut the chassis back 3/16 of an inch, and I'm going to have to remove one of the 4 screws that hold the servo to the chassis. Also, I am supposed to use this arm instead of the servo saver, but I don't have that arm, so it's going to have a second servo saver. And what I mean by that is that there is a servo saver literally incorporated into the steering Bellcranks design. So let's go ahead and get this all started, and I'll explain the reason why I need to get this done. So to get this started, I'm going to go ahead and remove the 4 screws that hold on the top chassis, as well as removing the 1 single screw that holds the steering Bellcrank arm to the steering Bellcranks. After that, I need to go ahead and remove the 3mm nut that holds the turnbuckle onto the steering block. Now in order for me to even reach that nut on each side, I need to go ahead and take off the front wheels. Okay, now I can go ahead and remove the turnbuckles and pull off the whole top chassis. Next, I need to go ahead and take off the steering Bellcranks, and that's held in with 2 screws, one right here and one there. Okay, now I just pull off the old steering Bellcranks. Come on, there we go. And now I can explain exactly why I'm doing this. The screws that go into the steering Bellcranks, well, I stripped all the plastic, so they keep coming undone. And I don't have a screw that's long enough that can literally go through this 3mm nut and hold it on there securely. So it's really, really tight on there. That's not good for the servo, especially in the long run. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the turnbuckles by undoing this screw and that 3mm nut, and then taking out the old bearings that are in the steering Bellcranks. With each one of the turnbuckles, I need to replace on one end the steel hollow balls with a smaller size. The reason for that is that where it hooks up to the steering Bellcranks, well, it's just too big, and it's going to grind too much. It's going to cause a whole bunch of problems. That's why you need the smaller size. So let's go ahead and replace those two. Alright, now that that's been taken care of, it's time to go ahead and assemble these. So there's this different setup for the Slash and Stampede 4x4 compared to the two-wheel drive Slash and Rustler and Bandit. The arm literally goes the opposite direction. Now with this one, with the Bandit of course, I'm going to have it facing this way with the side arm sticking off to the side. Just like that. On top of that, I need to go ahead and put the spring. Then I get to push it down with this plastic washer, and while it's down, I need to put this bearing in. Okay, with this one, all I'm going to have to do is slide this little tube on there, and that's it. Put a bearing on top, and of course a bearing on the bottom. And that goes for both sides. Next, I need to go ahead and attach these two together using the center arm and 2 screws. And the steering Bellcranks have been put together. Now it's time to go ahead and attach them to the top chassis. Now one of the extra steps is removing this screw right here. Well, I have stainless steel screws in there, and they're a different size than stock ones. In fact, they're a lot smaller, so I don't have to take that screw out. So I'm just going to go right on ahead and slide these all the way down, and then on top I'm going to attach the screws that hold them down. Now I'm going to flip it back over, move the arm back into place, and then put that screw right back in that holds it to the steering Bellcranks. So before I put all this back together, I need to go ahead and modify the chassis like the instructions say. I need to cut back this part of the chassis 3/16 of an inch. Now I'm just going to go ahead and use a little hacksaw to do that. I mean, it's really simple, but I have to do this on both sides. And there you go. I went ahead and cut off the 2 pieces I need to. If you really are doing this for yourself, I found out that if you cut the line directly at the top of the hole, it measures out 4 or 5mm perfectly, which is 3/16 of an inch. So not going to need those little pieces anymore. Now I did dye this chassis, and as you can see I uncovered some of the gray plastic underneath. Now I can easily just cover this up with some dye, but right now I'm feeling lazy and I don't want to take this whole thing apart just to dye that little piece. Eventually I will, but for now I'm just going to cover it up with a painter's pen and it'll look brand new. As you can see, the paint pen did the trick. Now I did get careless and I did cut into the chassis when I did this, but I mean this is a part of the RC you're never going to really look at, so I really don't care. But now that that's finally done with, I can go ahead and get the top chassis and put it back in. You gotta make sure that the servo wire goes off to the side and doesn't get pinched when I put all this back together. Now that that's back in, I'm going to reattach the 4 screws that hold in the top chassis. As you can see, I did a perfect job on trimming the chassis. So once I turn, you can see that the steering bell crank would have rubbed up against the chassis right there, but now that it's not there anymore, I don't have to worry about it. So it's time to go ahead and attach the turnbuckle by removing this screw and hooking it in just like that. And I'm going to be doing that on both sides. Now that the turnbuckles have been reattached to the steering bell cranks, I can attach the other side of the turnbuckle to the steering blocks. Reattach that 3mm nut and put on the front tires. Now that the front tires are reconnected as well as the turnbuckles, I'm done. So I went ahead and attached a battery. I'm going to test out the steering, and as you can see, steering is perfectly fine. I have to admit, guys, I love the setup of these steering bell cranks. The stock ones, I mean, they get the job done, but the ones I had in Nhexus, they were old and the holes were stripped out. So the screws kept falling out, the arms kept coming out. It was a pain. It really was. But now that I have these in here, I don't have to worry about that anymore. As I mentioned before, I didn't have the arm to replace the servo saver, so Nhexus is going to be using 2 servo savers for now. I really don't see a downfall on this, guys. I mean, the play of the wheels isn't really that much at all, and it was like that before, so if anything, I just have extra protection, so can't really get upset about that. And that was a level 24 upgrade for Nhexus.